and welcome to Just Onside. It's Tuesday, the day after Monday. I was off yesterday. We normally do record on a Monday, but we thought we'd give it a rest. But right, we're back. OS, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Ayub. I think the game on Sunday merited that I venture out at this late hour in Dubai and shoot this with yourself. I mean, incredible game, but we'll get on to that. But no, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I mean, I took yesterday. I was off work. I was recovering from the jet lag from watching the game at the weekend. It was absolutely fantastic. Been a really nice weekend. How's your weekend been?
Yeah, it's been good. All too fast, as is often the case with weekends. But yeah, incredible game. Wish in some ways I was in the UK to watch the game because I didn't really get a chance to follow the game, unfortunately. But yeah, watch the extended highlights and what have you. But no, weekend was very good. Arsenal with another great performance, so that made the weekend. But no, happy days, happy days.
You're forgetting about Friday. What happened on Friday?
Well, you asked me how I was. I mean, Friday was incredible, wasn't it? I'll give you the floor. Go on.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a massive. I mean, I was saying that I would have been happy with the draw. And I would have been happy with the draw because it's a very, very good Leicester side. In fact, I mean, it was a side that was much better than us on the day. But ultimately, it's about scoring more goals than the opposition. They were much the better team. Good fortune. I mean, really, Lady Luck was on our side because they were 1-0. I mean, we did have opportunities. It wasn't as if. I mean, if you look at the stats, it's quite an even game. But they had a goal chalked off, which was. I mean, if it was VAR, it would have been given. But that's where enormous amount of luck. Because if it goes 2-0, there's absolutely no way we're coming back from that. So, 80 minutes, we equalise. Decent finish by Roberts, but the second goal, enormous amount of fortunes, double deflection. And really, I suppose that third goal was the icing on the cake. But enormous result because it really, as I said, I would have been happy with a draw. At 80 minutes, I was absolutely thinking there's no way because really Leicester were in the ascendancy. They've got some quality players, really, really good players, and they missed some glorious opportunities. So absolutely buzzing. I mean, I was on a tremendous high. Southampton lost. Fortunately, Ipswich, those buggers, they keep on getting the results. They've had 4 wins on the bounce now. So but at least there's a little bit of daylight between Southampton, who I thought were going to be more of a threat. But you can't write Ipswich off. But happy days. And then on Sunday we travelled to London, to Wembley to watch the game, which is what we're going to talk about. So, OS, I presume you watched the game.
I did watch the game. Yes, I couldn't watch the game just because of timings, and I had another event to attend to. I had to go to a colleague's for a nice Jordanian dinner, which was very nice. But I did watch the extended highlights as well as the Sky Sports feature in terms of all the celebrations afterwards. Seemed an incredible atmosphere. How was it?
It was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's a game that, I mean, it's my first time at Wembley. I've never been to Wembley, so really it was a great experience just being at Wembley. But the game was absolutely just incredible. It's 0-0, and it really was one of the most exciting 0-0 games that you can imagine. It had everything. It had drama, excitement, controversy, and it was just an absolute pleasure. I mean, we talk often about, or it's often commented that players will run through brick walls. That was a classic example of how much reverence and respect that the players have for Jurgen Klopp, because there was, I mean, Diaz at 80 minutes, he was completely out on his knees, but he managed not just to continue for the 90 minutes, and then he obviously sort of, I don't know where he got that energy from. I mean, he wasn't sprinting everywhere, but he was still giving it something for the extra time as well. But in terms of the game, wonderful, wonderful advert just for English football. Now, obviously, it's a cup final, but it was a wonderful advert. Liverpool at the start, honestly, I did not expect them to get anything out of the game because I just thought that they've got a makeshift front three. Really, Liverpool's major strength is their front three, but this was a makeshift front three. It just had too many weak parts in my mind. I just thought that Chelsea have got a little bit too much for them. But Liverpool had their opportunities as well, but I always kept on thinking that Chelsea just had a little bit too much quality there. The goal chalked off for offside. And obviously at the stadium, we don't see the highlights of the replay. It was obviously must have been really, really close. I've watched the highlights, but it's still, I mean, I must confess, it's not that clear. But by all accounts, I think what people have said is that on one angle, a fraction of the knee is offside. It and again it goes back to what I was saying about Leeds. Sometimes you need good fortune, but Liverpool then had the goal, which I want to talk about. You've obviously seen the goal that was chalked off, the Van Dijk goal. Uh, I thought it was harsh, but the more that I look at it, the more I think, well, he's obviously in an offside position. He has impeded Colville. Now, I'm not sure whether Colville would have got to the ball because obviously the defender that was marking Van Dijk didn't. So, but and people are sort of saying, well, Arsenal always do that. They always have three guys or two guys who are offside. But so what we'll do, we'll just sort of go through the game. We'll talk about sort of incidents rather than just me sort of going through
Yeah.
the whole game. So what was your thoughts on that?
On the goal itself, or should we say goal, quote unquote, the goal, the disallowed
Yeah.
goal from Van Dijk. You're right. I did watch it multiple times after on Sunday night, and yeah, my view was when I watched it. I try not to form an opinion at the first time I see something. So I like to watch multiple elements, read what was the decision, what was the adjudication, right? Where are we at, and then take a very pragmatic and practical view. I think what happens is that I think, and you'll have to correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think at the start of the free kick, when I think it's Robertson who crosses it in from the left, is that Van Dijk is with Colville, and Endo, who I think is standing in the offside position. I think he's not necessarily with anyone, but he's kind of with Chilwell to some extent, and that's normally how you'd set up, right? You've got a big centre back, you'd put him on, you'd put your centre back on him. Endo's not necessarily a threat. So you put maybe Chilwell, a short fullback, relatively short fullback, on him. But what happens is that Endo, because he's in a slightly offside position, I think there's no dispute in the fact that Endo starts in an offside position. He ends up becoming a switch, as they would say in basketball, where Van Dijk then gets a little bit more of a free run on Chilwell and ultimately plants his header in a very, to be fair, very quality header past the goalkeeper. The question I ask myself to answer your question is, was Levi Colville significantly impeded with a view to Liverpool then gaining an unfair advantage because of that? And to be honest, I don't really think he was, to be fair. I thought it was incredibly harsh. Now, letter of the law and all that, fair enough. And some may say, well, that's all that matters. And fine, that's their interpretation. But the question here is, has Endo caused Liverpool to get an unfair advantage? And genuinely, I really don't think it's the case. I'm not sure Colville is significantly impeded to the point where he's literally blocked off or clearly going to be in a position to challenge Van Dijk, but then's been, like I said, impeded by Endo. I think they were looking for something and they adjudicated on something that perhaps quite wasn't there, in my humble opinion. Because if you're going to give that, then I could make the argument that any player that stands in an offside position, and I mean that from a set piece, you should flag it offside. And the reason being is because, say he's offside Endo, not necessarily next to Van Dijk, but let's say he's offside on the other side, totally on the other side. I can still make the argument, if you want to stretch the laws of interpretation, where it's having a ripple effect to everyone then marking the offside player. So there's always some advantage that maybe the offside player is going to gain for his or her own team. So the point I'm just trying to make is, it felt like a stretch of the interpretation of the rules to me. It wasn't a clear block. I think Endo was in an offside position and then kind of stood his ground to some extent. He didn't venture out looking for Colwell to some extent. That's my interpretation anyway. So I thought it was very harsh. And I think to rule out goals, it has to be a significant unfair advantage that the attacking team has gained. And I'm not sure that was the case here. What were your thoughts?
Initially, when I watched it, I did think it was harsh. The more I watched it, the more I was thinking, well, maybe I suppose he is slightly interfering with perhaps potentially a player who could have intercepted the ball. I don't think so. I mean, I think looking at it again, I think you're right, because it opens up a can of worms if you just suddenly say, well, look, every single player that's on the park in some way has an impact, because if you're like to your point, if there is a player in a certain position as a defender, obviously your eye is on there. So therefore there is an attention. So therefore there is some sort of impact that every single player has. Now, from a footballing point of view, I still maintain that if Endo wasn't there, that goal still would have been scored. I don't think Colwill was in a position to intercept that cross, and that really is. But then it becomes quite subjective. That really becomes for a referee to understand the game well enough, and therein lies the problem again. I don't think these referees are competent enough to understand the game that well. But this should really, again, there should be clarity because Arsenal always do, and I think there's a number of teams that do it. But there has to be a little bit more clarity because it is at what point do you say, right, that player was interfering? Because looking at it again, you had a defender next to or marking Van Dijk, who obviously wasn't able to stop the goal. Now, this was Colville, who was, I'm not sure exactly how far away he was, but I certainly don't think that in the line that he was running, he was going to be in a position where he was going to intercept that cross. So whether Endor stopped him or didn't stop him, it wasn't going to have an impact. But again, it's an argument where would he have continued running in the straight line? Would he have gone right? But it becomes very, very subjective. But I think there needs to be clarity because lots of teams do this. And if this sets a precedence, then really, I think you'd almost want now, as a defender, you almost might intentionally run into an opposition player who is coming back from an offside position and then use that as an opportunity to say, well, look, I was blocked. So it needs to be something that I think needs to be explained. I think the officials really have to be clear on this because it may be something that in the future has an impact because people will use this as an example. But on to something else as well that I want to talk about. There was an incident with Caicedo, a Liverpool player, a player that Liverpool obviously have courted, who had an okay game. I thought he was okay. I mean, people sort of said he was a little bit naughty, but there was a little bit of naughtiness on a player who eventually had to go off. Now, it was a challenge again. If you watch the still frame of it, it's a nasty, nasty challenge. Now, I presume, watched the challenge. What were your thoughts on that? Was it a red card? Was it because he never even got a card?
I think these are the ones, to your point, where if it's a still image, which it was, and it's shown like that, it looks much worse than it is. And that's a cliche, right? The question I look at, or the issue that I look at is, was it sufficiently reckless? Or was it simply just mistimed or what have you? I think if he got him any higher up, I think he was in trouble. I think then VAR perhaps would have intervened. But I think sometimes we have to consider that the game is played, especially that one. I mean, you were there, so you'd have appreciated the speed and intensity of the game. And like I said, the atmosphere was electric. But you'd have, I think there is a certain intensity to the game now, especially in the 21st century, where you do have to factor in that the speed of play is a lot more intense and a lot more quicker, generally speaking, than it was previously. And I think for me, I was okay with the call in the sense that I just don't think it's sufficiently reckless. I don't think it was endangering the opponent. I think it's just simply his foot has to end up going somewhere because it's just mistimed. It ends up on a point where unfortunately he's done damage to the opponent. Now, football is a contact sport. It's unfortunately an injury sport in the sense of you've got limbs colliding, bodies colliding. You've got a lot of force and intent, whether it's tackles or whatever it may be. I'm not sure freeze frames is what I'm going to go off when I'm determining whether or not a player was endangering another one. That's the key. That's the key. You've got to think, and that's not to say that every challenge meets the threshold of a red card if it's endangering the opponent. Sometimes you don't wish to endanger the opponent, but unfortunately you've ended up in a reckless situation and perhaps injured the opponent or threatened to cause an injury. So I'm not saying it always has to be intentional or what have you. I think on this one, unfortunately, just because of the way limbs are and ankles are, all the rest of it, you're going to find yourselves in situations where sometimes oppositional force, so to speak, applied on a foot is going to cause, or an ankle is going to cause that type of situation. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances. I'm not sure it met the threshold of a red card, but that's just me.
But this goes back to the question of when Curtis Jones was sent off. Because again, it's a question of is it intent or is it the actual challenge that whether it's intentional or not, whether even if there's no intent, because Curtis Jones, when he was sent off, absolutely in no way the intention was to commit that sort of foul, it was
True.
only by chance that he had rolled over the ball. In a similar vein, I mean, the only thing was it was curious that Caicedo made a challenge, but he wasn't looking. That's what I find that quite strange, because whenever you're making a challenge, you're looking at where you want to make impact or where you want to try and get the ball. So that was slightly sort of confusing for me as to why he would not be looking at where he's challenging. Uh, but it's one where I think you can understand the decision not being given. But then there has to be consistency, and this is always the issue: the inconsistency. Is it the challenge? Is it the intent? What is it that is the reason a referee's looking at? Because if it wasn't intent, then at least the challenge was really bad. So therefore, do you penalise the player? The fact he didn't get a card, I don't know, man. As I said, I'm not expert enough in understanding the laws of the game, but certainly from what I've seen, if Curtis Jones has been sent off, then really, at least I would have expected a yellow card.
Yeah, but you got to be careful. If you remember when we discussed the Curtis Jones red card, and we had a lot of other things to discuss from that game, but Curtis Jones, when he was red carded, you and I both agreed that for me it was not a red card. And that's not to do with the fact that he didn't intend. I never use intent as the reason or justification for it not being a red card. I don't think he sufficiently endangered the opponent in a reckless way. I mean, so I'm taking intent out of it. I don't even think when he challenged Bissouma that he was endangering Bissouma. I think it was Bissouma at the time. So the point is, and also I would say to Liverpool fans, I don't think you can point to that as justification, because they were up in arms when Curtis Jones was red carded. So you've got to try. It's not a case, oh well, we got, so you hit two wrongs don't make a right here. Let's be fair. So I think, look, there are times when unfortunately feet will come together. Now, if he came in with a great deal of force, if he came in high, if he came in with a certain not intent, but with a certain where a natural consequence of Caicedo's actions would have been to endanger or injure Gravenberch, then listen, I'm all for it. Red card. Remember, I don't think VAR can intervene to issue a yellow card. So if the referee misses it, VAR can't intervene to say, well, it was at least a yellow. They can only intervene if they think it was a red. So, look, I think you've got to let that be. It's unfortunate that the player got injured. Do I think it was due to Caicedo's reckless actions that was the case? It was due to his actions, yes, unfortunate. I don't think it was due to him being sufficiently reckless to the point where you have to then punish him with a red card, in my opinion.
Right. Well, that's our thoughts, audience. Let us know what your thoughts are on both incidents: Van Dijk's goal that wasn't given and Caicedo's challenge. Let's talk about the game.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic. What were your thoughts? Because we talked about it on the preview, that this is a great opportunity for Pochettino, especially with the injuries as well. Now, I think he's a man. If he wasn't under pressure before, he certainly is now. So have a talk about the game, what you expected, and what your thoughts were, because really it was a Chelsea side, albeit a young side, as was Liverpool's, but a young Chelsea side with far more experience, far much quality than Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been a lot made up of the narratives after the game, Ayub, about Chelsea. And it's often because I think the two teams were coming into the game with very different perspectives and very different attitudes. Liverpool absolutely flying high, top of the Premier League table, irrespective of the fact that they did not play this weekend in the Premier League, still maintaining top spot, absolutely flying, attacking on all fronts, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, Europa League, and in the Premier League in what will be Jurgen Klopp's last season. So a lot of positivity about Liverpool, albeit with a huge injury list. And then you have Chelsea, who are having a very so-so season again, unfortunately for them. Pochettino's first at Stamford Bridge. But here, after a lot of, let's say, negativity with the club over the last 18 months, comes this opportunity to get that monkey off your back and land your first trophy in England. So I think there was a different type of pressures, I would say. I don't think Liverpool were under much pressure at all, to be fair, heading into the game, albeit there's always pressure because you want to get to the final, you want to win, regardless of the team that you put out. But two very different feelings and emotions. Liverpool is one where a lot of neutrals take to Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp is a very likable and affable character. Chelsea often seen by many neutrals as the poster child of, I mean, it kind of probably stems from the Roman Abramovich era, but just this team that gets through managers like hot dinners, and it's a club sometimes that's been accused of having very little soul and very little emotion, whereas Liverpool are the very embodiment of what ultimately what, in a sense, what that club, what that manager represents for that club, for that community, for that city, and further afield. So, I mean, you heard Gary Neville speak very kind of positively and in positive terms about Jurgen Klopp afterwards. I really thought he summarized it well in terms of calling him a monster manager and a few other things, but it was goosebumps in terms of the commentary around Klopp after the game. Yeah, about Chelsea first, Ayub, and I will tackle the game a little bit. Huge opportunity missed, wasn't it, Ayub? I mean, great chance playing against a team, especially at the end with multiple youngsters, players you've not even heard of.
Yeah.
Great opportunity. I think what's going to hurt Pochettino, and I think you'll agree, is the fact that extra time got away from them and his approach to extra time and his comments supposedly afterwards as well regarding penalties and players feeling tired, etc., and what have you. And I think that's the thing. Whereas with Chelsea, people or neutrals are not necessarily going to afford them that privilege or that kind of excuse, are they, Ayub? And I think what I would say, I think Gary Neville, in my humble opinion, went a little too far. I think you've got to be careful. I think when you're commentating, he's entitled to an opinion, but I think he'll look back on that tagline, that punchline that he used about £1 billion bottle jobs or whatever it was that he said, and I think he'll look back on that with some regret. I think you've got to be careful. I think in football we sometimes are a bit too quick to kind of lambast teams or managers and what have you. And I think a fair bit of decorum would have been called for. I think at that point, look, there's a disappointment. Chelsea are quite disappointed. It's difficult. I don't think you need to be sticking the knife in kind of minutes, moments after the game. On the game itself, what an incredible game, Ayub, just very quickly. Honestly, the atmosphere, even watching it on the TV with the extended highlights, was the most incredible. You felt it. I mean, they played the same game a couple of years ago with Tuchel in terms of this incredible 0-0 between the two teams. Goes to penalties. I remember thinking then when I watched that game, thinking, how have these two teams not scored? And then they serve up a sequel to that kind of incredible game. I mean, how neither team scored, at least till the very end, is beyond me, honestly, really. I mean, they weren't just chances, were they? They were like kill-edge opportunities.
Yeah.
So both keepers, I think, playing their part in preserving the clean sheets till the very end, I should say, or at least in regulation time. But incredible game, incredible atmosphere. Must have been an event and an experience for yourself. I'm keen to hear about that. But I think from what it means for clubs, for both clubs, for Liverpool, it sets them up, doesn't it, for what is to come in terms of the competitions that they're thriving for. I mean, you can feel now they're in the final throes of the title race. They'll really feel confident if they can get some of those players back, that they can go at this. This will stand them in great stead. Maybe give some of those young players a few minutes here and there, depending on what's required, if and when, maybe in the FA Cup later on. But incredible boost for Liverpool. The celebrations afterwards were, I mean, it centered around Klopp. He lifted the trophy with Van Dijk. It felt befitting that should be the case. But it really felt like the beginning of the end, unfortunately, that we're not going to see this great manager on our shores for the time being. So that's the thing. From a Chelsea perspective, where do you go from here? I mean, it's a long rescue mission from here. Champions League looks forlorn in terms of getting Champions League through the league and what have you. It's very difficult to see how this season pans out in a positive light for them. This will require a great deal of soul searching and thinking. Will Pochettino make it to the second season? Time will tell. But you could see it on his face at full time. You could see that this one got away from him. And I think he felt the pressure in terms of that burden right at the very end, full time. I think he understood what this meant in terms of the opportunity and the narrative that was going to be forged about Liverpool's kids against a $1 billion outfit. So there you go. I think Chelsea, big opportunity missed. From a Liverpool perspective, it sets them up perfectly for what is a hunt for multiple trophies to end the illustrious career of Jurgen Klopp at the helm of Liverpool.
Pochettino will be hurting big time. It really was. I mean, you've alluded to the point that he had a great opportunity, and it was. It almost was. For Liverpool, it was a win-win because, in a sense, the fact that they've got so many injuries that they weren't expected to win the game. It was just about putting in effort and maybe, I suppose, making a game of it. for Pochettino, he just with the side that Liverpool fielded, it was almost incumbent upon his charges to make sure that they win the game because, in a sense, it was the only inevitable eventuality that really there is no way that Chelsea side. I mean, they made a lot was made of the ages, but Chelsea had a really young side as well. But it's as I said at the start, it's a young side, but a very experienced side in terms of ability. You've got some very, very expensive players there as well. So proven players. Uh, the atmosphere. I mean, we'll talk. I mean, I'm going to talk about the atmosphere because I was obviously being physically there. You really can savor the atmosphere. And also it was more than just a game because you've got Liverpool, a working class city. It really is a city which is steeped in working class history. You've got Chelsea, which is it's an affluent place, and you've always got the accusation you've got an affluent fan base, even though historically perhaps it's had a working class fan base, but very in recent times certainly it's been considered a club which is for it's not true fans, or at least a large portion aren't true fans, and you could tell because you had Chelsea with all the I think we gave them flags. So they were waving all the same small flags, whereas Liverpool, you could see flags, and it was wonderful. It was a sea of red, but you had flags. I am absolutely convinced that the flags were from the 1970s, from the 1980s. There were different types of flags, and it really represented almost a history of Liverpool from the 1970s, 80s, 90s onwards. And it was just unbelievable. There was a moment in the game in the extra time, I think it was extra time, where they were all waving their flags and they burst into song. And it's like hairs on the back of your neck. It just was unbelievable. And at the start, when they played the national anthem, all the Liverpool fans were booing. Now, I'm not sure what your take on royalty is, but I'm not a monarchist. A lot of people stood when the national anthem came on. I was quite happy, and there's nothing. I mean, people can criticise, but for me, freedom of speech. Liverpool people, there's a reason why. It's not just a spontaneous reaction. It's a reason for it, and a genuine reason for it, and I have absolutely no problem with that. And it was just amazing. The game was absolutely breathtaking. It really was a game. As I said, Liverpool have opportunities, but Chelsea, I always sort of felt they had just a little bit more class. The keeper Kelleher was magnificent. He made some wonderful saves in the game. He kept them in the game. As did the Chelsea keeper. There was a couple of times he made some decent saves. As the game wore on, with that disallowed goal, you just thought, is it going to be Klopp's day? But even if they hadn't have got the result, the performance that the players gave was just incredible. It's that sort of players going through brick walls, and it really was. I mean, I've used that before, but every single Liverpool player, they couldn't have given any more. And when the kids came as well, and you were absolutely right. I mean, there was McConnell came on. I mean, he looked about six. I'd never seen him before. Bobby Clark's lad came on. Uh, Sort of, I think it's Neil Dan's lad, Jaden Dan's sort of came on as well. So I mean, they've got footballing pedigree in terms of their fathers, but these were young kids. And again, it just they were going to give it everything they possibly could do. And then when the goal went in, and you knew there was no doubt with that one, there was absolutely no doubt when Van Dijk scored that winner. It was just the most euphoric feeling, and the sound from the Liverpool fans. It's something that will live with me for many a year to come. It was just absolutely electrifying. And there is something about Jurgen Klopp. This man is just, he will be sorely missed. And it was fitting. And I do hope that Liverpool win not just this trophy, but I mean, if they could do the quadruple, I don't think they will, but if they could do the quadruple, there is no fitting finale and send off for one of the greatest managers that's ever graced the Premier League. And I was so delighted. I mean, as soon as the game finished, obviously my lad was there, the Chelsea fan. I think he's been there 4 or 5 times now. he's not seen him win. So I felt for him. But Liverpool, for me, and Klopp, so deserved. Those young kids, I mean, I hope they all have stellar careers, but I don't think they'll ever forget this game because it was incredible. I mean, the outpouring of emotion after the game. It is a club that is absolutely united from the players, from the coaches, from the management, from the directors to the fans. It is a club completely in sync. A wonderful result, a wonderful day, and I must confess it. For my first visit to Wembley, it couldn't have got any better.
Yeah, very well said. And I do want to just tack on to something that you shared. You mentioned the captain, you mentioned the manager, and honestly, from a captain's perspective, Van Dijk, incredible performance. Captain's performance, reminding the league. I mean, I've said before that I think this year he's been absolutely back to his best, imperious best. Whether he's the best centre back in the Premier League is open for discussion. Arsenal do have a couple of centre backs that I think have been incredibly good this season, especially William Saliba. But look, in the end, he is I guess, the most iconic Premier League centre back of his generation, at least right now. He's regarded as one of the very best. So I think for him to kind of cap this off with let's call it a goal and a half with his disallowed goal to win the game in the final moments. And I've said this before with when it comes to finals, whether it's finals or big games in any sport, it's the reason why we love the game, or at least the reason why I love sports in general, is you get moments that you'll never forget, and then you sometimes put yourself in the shoes of the sportsman or sportswoman in terms of who achieve that level of greatness. And I think to myself, how would it have felt if it's a corner, it's the last couple of minutes, it's been a long game, a very emotional game in a lot of ways. You could
Mm.
have lost, you could have won, you could have scored, you got goals, this like controversy you said in the lead up to the subject. And here you are right into the near post, you flick header, goes past. I mean, the euphoria must be like you can't even put it into
Mm.
words because you've got one half of the stadium that erupts. I mean, you saw the sidelines in terms of the agony, the ecstasy, the players all jumping on top of Van Dijk. What makes sport great was it's what makes football great. Those moments. So for me, he's deserving to get that moment. I think he's probably not had too many. I guess, although he's been the best defender of his time, I think that's fair to say. It's nice that he got to cap it off with that kind of moment in the at the attacking end because he's a threat from set pieces. For Klopp, yeah, what can he say? I'm glad in some ways that he went up there to win. To lift the trophy. I think he's normally been quite a reluctant person to
Mm.
celebrate within the group. I think he's very keen to let the players take the limelight. Yes, he does the famous kind of fist bumps to the cop end after big wins at Anfield, but I think that's part of his allure, part of his personality, part of his character, is what makes him resonate and connect with that club. Has there ever been a manager of a football club that has had 100% approval rating from start to finish? Honestly, that's how I
Mm.
see Jurgen Klopp. He came in with a huge reputation. Liverpool moved on Brendan Rodgers during that kind of season. Relatively early on. Why? Because Jurgen Klopp was available. It looked like he may take another job. You bring him in off the back of all of his heroics and great achievements at Dortmund, and he's had a 100% approval rating from start to finish. Zero question marks from any segments of the fan base. That is impossible to achieve, honestly. So for me, he will be missed. I'm glad that they got to win the trophy from a Liverpool perspective. Yes, my team's fighting in the Premier League with them, but of course, if it is Liverpool, there will be this incredible send off that he will get, a very emotional one. I think he felt incredibly emotional in terms of the comments he made after the game, talking about how it was one of the most special trophies, if not the
Mm.
most special trophy that he's ever lifted. And you can understand what he meant for
Mm.
sure in terms of, I mean, you're seeing kids. I mean, he probably some of these boys would have been what 10 or 9 when he probably joined Liverpool, the club that
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
So for them to kind of play a significant part in winning a trophy for Liverpool must be incredibly pleasing for a manager who is a people's person. He's very
Mm.
much an emotional person in that sense, resonates with human beings. So look, from a Klopp. Incredible, incredible, incredible. I think you're rightly so getting a lot of the plaudits from a Chelsea perspective, though. I think you phrased it absolutely bang on. Pochettino will be hurting, and so will Chelsea. So not sure where they go from here.
Yeah, I mean it it was. I mean, as I said, I felt quite privileged to be there, and I think he's absolutely right. I mean, in terms of achievements, it's the Carabao Cup, so you can be quite sort of glib about it and say it's a Mickey Mouse tournament. But I think the context is that it's a very, very depleted Liverpool side. And I think it will. It felt like it as well. I mean, as a spectator watching that, it really felt, because especially when the kids came on right at the end, it really was. I mean, we're talking about, I think 3 or 4 players came on where they'd probably had about 5 minutes of game time. So it really was not just inexperienced, but sort of young kids who've sort of not experienced the big time at all. But again, it was you could see the impact of Klopp, and I think that's what I'll take from that game and that display. That it really, I suppose, I mean, it's a well-worn phrase about sort of players playing for the manager. Uh, you saw that it was tangible. And as I said, I mean, the image of Diaz. I mean, obviously, because I'm there, I can watch. It's not just on a square screen. I can watch players across the field, and Diaz was absolutely, his tank was empty. I was thinking, my goodness me, he's not going to make it to 90 minutes. But this is where it's like, if you've got so much respect for a coach, that it's almost, there is some, I mean, you find this extra energy from somewhere, and you could see he was absolutely out on his knees, but he couldn't. I mean, it was almost as if I cannot let Klopp down, and it was inspiring, it was humbling, it was moving, and that's why it makes the victory so memorable. That it literally was kids, but the 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 commitment shown to Klopp, and that's really what it was. It was almost as if it was destiny. It was meant to be that Klopp is writing his own script at this moment in time, so it's absolutely fantastic. So I was delighted, as I said. I mean, I felt for my son that he's probably thinking, will I ever see Chelsea win at Wembley? But a wonderful, wonderful, almost fairy tale for Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, and then it's an experience, as I said, it will live long in my memory.
Absolutely. No, amazing. Would have been an amazing experience. I mean, one final point on the game. I mean, there was a female pundit whose name escapes me because genuinely I've not come across her in my current times. I mean, she covered the game with Ian Wright and Tim Sherwood on one of the panels, and she spoke about how, with Kelly Cates, and she spoke about, in a very poignant way, about how Jurgen Klopp is the perfect embodiment for that club. I've thought about this obviously many times, but in terms of, he's the right man for that club, that city, that community, in terms of what they've previously been through, but also what they are as people, in terms of working class people, very kind of hardworking and all the rest of it. It's the perfect embodiment, and he coaches and he spearheads, and he's the figurehead of that city in some ways, representative of the city that he's with. He doesn't. He is literally the perfect personality fit. On the other hand, you have Chelsea that have been assembled in a very kind of ad hoc fashion, not very well thought out. A lot of turnover of players, personnel, manager, boardroom, owner. There's a very cold, calculated feel about Chelsea quite often. You think about the previous era under Roman Abramovich, you think about this era in terms of the way they've gone about things, 8-year contracts, all the rest of it, in a very haphazard way. And it's the kind of perfect kind of antithesis in terms of what the two clubs meant. So on the one hand, you've got this warm, loving personality in a sense of Jurgen Klopp, where even neutrals, even Man United fans kind of resonate and kind of do enjoy the fact that, I mean, they absolutely 100% would take him to be their manager at Manchester United for the last 7-8 years. But on the other hand, and Pochettino comes across as a very decent human being, don't get me wrong, but what I mean is, it's because he's also feeling a bit uncertain about his situation. The players are not necessarily don't have perfect chemistry in the sense of having that togetherness, having that spirit, having that feeling of we're all in this together. Yes, they want to win the game. Don't get me wrong, they want to win the game. But you mentioned about Diaz, and if you follow that thought through, when you really need to dig deep and you think there's a trophy to be won here, and we're at the final kind of cards to play, let's say, in terms of trying to get this result, you question which team's going to be able to find that reserve a little bit more. Is it the team that's kind of together and been together for quite some time and have got a glue and a spearhead, who brings them all together and empowers them to play and perform. On the other hand, you've got a team that's maybe perhaps going to, the corner was symptomatic, kind of leaving things to one another, not taking ownership, not taking responsibility. Manager doesn't quite feel as if he's got the complete control of the club because he's also very much early in his tenure at the club. So in some ways, it was the fitting end in a sense, but what you'd kind of expect, even though, and if you remember on Friday, I said I still fancy Liverpool somehow to sneak it and sneak it. So they did. Incredible game, irrespective. But in the end, I think it's a final that probably will be talked about for quite some time, even though it is, to your point, respectfully, just the Carabao Cup.
All right, wonderfully put. And we'll call it a day in terms of the review of the Carabao Cup. But before we go, I think there was something that you wanted to talk about, something which is quite touching and quite emotional, really. So I'll give the floor to you, OS.
Yeah, just very briefly, you and I both know a gentleman who's worked with us. He's also played football with me, who's incredibly unwell right now, suffering from quite severe illness. There's a lot of thoughts and feelings and prayers going out towards him in terms of hoping that he makes a complete recovery. I won't name him due to the fact that I don't think it's fair and respectful to do that. But a lot of our viewers know who I'm referring to, and I think it's just a gentle reminder to everyone to continue to pray for him, pray for his family, pray for steadfastness and kind of a certain kind of patience in the face of this illness. And again, just a reminder to everyone to pray for his recovery, and hopefully he can make it through.
I mean, sweet words. And I'm sure our viewers obviously are aware of who we're talking about, and we wish the absolute best. And on that rather somber note, we'll call it a day. So as always, stay safe, look after yourself. Hopefully, we'll be recording on Friday, previewing the Premier League. So take it easy, look after yourself. We'll see you soon.